On April 23, 1967, the Soviet spacecraft Soyuz 1 launched from the Baikonur Cosmodrome in present-day Kazakhstan. The Soyuz 1's purpose was to serve as a test for the beginning of a new line of Soviet spacecraft technology, a high priority for the Soviet Union during the Cold War as tensions mounted ever further with the United States' scientific advances at that time. Inside was Vladimir Komarov, the first cosmonaut to complete 2 successful flights to outer space. After preparations were completed, the Soyuz 1 was launched at 12:32 a.m. GMT. The first issue occurred relatively quickly after launch when one of the craft's solar panels didn't launch, leading to Soyuz 1 having a significant power shortage to several of its systems. As the craft continued its orbits around Earth, more problems began to plague Komarov. The manual system of the craft was only partially responsive, as well as the automatic systems being fully dysfunctional. Additionally, further issues regarding the orientation detectors made it much harder for Komarov to properly maneuver the craft. Throughout these orbits, Komarov was able to transmit the progression of the problems to his crew back in the Baikonur Cosmodrome. The crew of another craft, Soyuz 2, modified their mission to aid Komarov by alleviating his technical issues. Unfortunately, thunderstorms in the Cosmodrome's vicinity ultimately led Soyuz 2's crew to stay on the ground due to the potential of booster system overcharge from the storm cell's electricity. After much deliberation with other flight officials and scientists over the craft's problems, the flight director Alexei Kosygin decided to abort the Soyuz 1 mission. Komarov subsequently fired the retro rockets of Soyuz 1 and re-entered the Earth's atmosphere. In order to slow the descent, a drag parachute was deployed. Komarov also tried to deploy the main parachute, but an unknown defect barred deployment. He then activated the manually deployed reserve chute, but it unfortunately became entangled with the drag chute and effectively rendered the Soyuz 1 descent module helpless while plummeting 40 meters a second. Although the craft had many malfunctions, the radio systems were left uninhibited throughout the descent. The audio logs of Komarov's final moments are as follows. Reports from the Soviets claimed that the audio translated as Komarov claiming separation had occurred. Others hear Komarov saying that the heat was rising in his capsule. However, the panicked tone in his voice has led many to believe that he was aware of his situation and cursing the engineers who sent him on a perilous and ultimately doomed mission. After the crash, several rescue helicopters flew to the scene and attempted to survey the damage caused by Soyuz 1's impact. Additionally, the retro rockets began to fire after the crash, creating strong walls of flames to be quelled by rescue teams. After some fires were eventually stopped, the true damage of the craft was more visible. The entire base of the descent capsule had been burned through. It was all but proven to the rescue team that Komarov was indeed dead. The initial rescue teams shot up a flare to signal for medical assistance, and another team arrived to further put out the fires. However, this proved ineffective, and the rescue teams resorted to using shovels and dirt as a smothering agent to prevent further oxygen from reaching the fires. Throughout this process, the descent module had fully disintegrated, which left the team with only a pile of debris and the entry hatch to the remnants of Soyuz 1. Once finally inside of the destroyed craft, rescuers found the remains of Komarov still secured to the center couch, but he had been rendered a mass of burned clothing and flesh. The autopsy of Komarov proved that he had indeed died from multiple blunt force injuries sustained during his unimpeded descent. Komarov was posthumously granted the Award of Lenin and was for a second time named a hero of the USSR. He was given a state funeral, and his ashes lay inside of the Kremlin Wall necropolis at the Red Square in Moscow. Interestingly enough, a former KGB agent named Veniamin Rosayev in interviews after the crash claimed that engineers spotted over 200 faults in the Soyuz 1's design. Upon reporting these faults, party leaders rejected any further action be taken, and in Rosayev's words, the concerns of the engineers were, quote, overruled by political pressures for a series of space feats to mark the anniversary of Lenin's birthday. Rusayev also claimed that there were plans to have famous cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin man this craft, and that Komarov wanted to maintain his position inside of the craft despite opposing pressures from Rusayev and the Soviet Politburo. But some Soviet space historians have challenged Rusayev's claims, describing them as over-exaggerated or implausible. All that remains of the crash today is a crater 3 miles to the west of Karabutak, Kazakhstan, a memorial monument of Komarov at the roadside of a small park, and this haunting distress message of Vladimir Komarov's final words. Byron Smith was born on the 11th of June, 1948. From what is known of him, Smith lived most of his life in Little Falls, Minnesota. His main occupation before he retired was a security engineering officer for the U.S. State Department. After retirement, Byron led a mostly quiet life as he never once married or had children. On Thanksgiving Day of 2012, Byron Smith's home was broken into by 2 teenage cousins named Haley Kiefer and Nicholas Brady. According to the police reports, Smith was visiting neighbors when he spotted Kiefer driving in the direction of his home. Smith then told his neighbor that he needed to get ready for her. The car was indeed captured on video surveillance heading towards Smith's home. Once inside, Byron powered on a personal recording device and unscrewed several light bulbs from the ceiling and sat in a chair in a well-hidden spot. Shortly after, Smith heard a window upstairs being broken, followed by Nicholas Brady climbing into his home. Smith waited silently in his chair for 12 minutes until Nicholas descended into the basement.
In your left eye. Bruce, stop by tomorrow morning. No rush, but as soon as convenient. Can you do that? Yeah. Park to the north. 100 yards north of the corner, and walk in from the west. I realize I don't have an appointment, but I would like to see one of the lawyers here.
Byron then shot Nicholas multiple times, stating, "You're dead."
You're dead.
Smith taunted Nicholas and wrapped his corpse in a tarp before dragging him into another room. Smith went upstairs for a few more minutes, then ran back downstairs to reload his weapon and assumed his position in the chair once more. Only a few minutes later, Haley entered the home searching for Nicholas. What follows is some very heavy and disturbing audio captured by Smith's personal recording device.
Oh, sorry about that. You're dying.
Both teenagers were shot multiple times, with Nicholas being shot 3 times, while Haley was shot a total of 6 times. The deaths of the 2 teenagers were not immediately reported to the authorities. Byron Smith waited 1 day until after the fact to do so. After being taken in for questioning, Byron described fatally shooting both teenagers in the head. He was also quoted saying, "If you're trying to shoot somebody and they laugh at you, you go again," after claiming that he heard Haley laugh following his first shot, but the recordings clearly recorded Haley screaming, "Oh my God," after the first hit. Byron also admitted later that he fired more shots than he needed to. It's important to note that Byron claimed to have been burgled at least half a dozen times before the Thanksgiving Day shootings, even though he only reported 1 to the police, with investigators only finding proof for 2 burglaries. Items stolen from Smith's home included coins from a collection, his father's POW watch, a chainsaw, and $4,000 in cash. After these burglaries, Smith began wearing a holster with a loaded gun as well as stashing water and granola bars inside of his basement. He also installed a video surveillance system to better protect himself against further crimes. Additionally, Nicola's sister claimed that he had stolen drugs from her home on the 28th of August. Inside of the car driven by Nicholas was evidence linking him to yet another burglary of a retired teacher one night prior to his death. Subsequent debates were sparked following the killings, specifically regarding the castle doctrine, a legal principle in America stating that one is justified in the use of deadly force in order to protect one's home and its inhabitants from intruders without obligation to retreat. One sheriff working the case stated, "The law doesn't permit you to execute somebody once the threat is gone." Additionally, Smith left several hours more of incriminating audio on his recording device. Some of the things stated were, "In your left eye," in reference to Haley, who was to be shot in the left eye, and, "I realize I don't have an appointment, but I would like to see one of the lawyers here." The prosecution saw these prior statements as a rehearsal of what Smith planned to do to the cousins, indicating that he knew that an attorney would most likely be required in the near future. A final chilling set of statements was made by Byron following the shootings. "I am not a bleeding heart liberal. I felt like I was cleaning up a mess. Not like spilled food, not like vomit, not even like diarrhea, the worst mess possible. And I was stuck with it. In some tiny little respect, I was doing my civic duty. If the law enforcement system couldn't handle it, I had to do it. I had to do it. The law system couldn't handle her and it fell into my lap, and she dropped her problem in my lap. And she threw her own problem in my face, and I had to clean it up." All of this evidence presented to the court led them to give Smith 2 counts of second-degree murder, which was soon up to 2 counts of first-degree murder in April of 2013, with his bail being set at $50,000, roughly equivalent to $67,000 in today's money. Currently, Smith is still incarcerated in Oak Park Heights Prison, the only maximum security prison in the state of Minnesota. In 1984, Henry McCabe was born in Lofa County, Liberia. Unfortunately for McCabe and his family, Liberia was in the midst of a rough civil war that left his father poisoned and dead. As a child, McCabe's family decided to escape the horrors of the Liberian Civil War and emigrate to the United States. As an adult, Henry lived in the city of Mounds View, Minnesota. Prior to this, McCabe lived in California and met a woman named Corrine, whom he married and had 2 daughters with. McCabe was employed by the Minnesota Department of Revenue and had high political aspirations, even wanting to return to his home of Liberia and possibly become its leader to better the country. On Sunday the 6th of September 2015, Henry went to a barbecue hosted by a friend of his, Emmanuel D. Henry had called D earlier in the day to ask why he hadn't been invited, saying, "You're my boy," to D. At this barbecue, McCabe also met with William Pappas Kennedy, an athlete and fellow countryman from Liberia. After the barbecue, McCabe and Kennedy both decided to go out to a club called Pavlitsky's, north of where they were situated. Henry asked Pappas for a lift, and Henry paid Pappas' entry fee. Once inside, the two mostly went their own separate ways as they weren't the closest of friends, having only met once prior to the barbecue at Dee's. At some point, Henry saw a friend of both him and his wife Karine, Jonathan J.T. Thomas. Interestingly, J.T. moved to Minnesota shortly after Henry and Karine did. McCabe later gave J.T. his wallet to buy a round of drinks, but the wallet was never returned to McCabe. At around 2 in the morning, Henry and Pappas left Pavlitsky's. On the way back, Henry was on the phone with Karine for most of the ride. Henry then asked Pappas to drop him off at a gas station near his residence. Purposefully or not, Henry left a set of keys inside of Pappas' car after he was dropped off. Now, let's shift to Karine for a moment. Before and after speaking with her husband, Henry, Karine was calling Henry's older brother, Timothy, and JT. Karine told JT that her husband was acting odd, but once contacted by JT, told him, "Don't mind that woman, she's crazy." Karine's final call was made to Henry at 2:33 a.m., where Henry was making strange noises and incoherently speaking. Karine tried to connect Henry's brother with them in a 3-way call, but Timothy's phone went to voicemail. Karine then went to bed. A few days later, on September 7th at 2:28 a.m., Karine received a voicemail from Henry, the final communication anyone would ever receive from him. That same day, Henry was reported as missing to the police. The community of Mounds View in Minnesota then came together in an effort to find Henry. After almost 2 months of searching, Henry's body was located at Rush Lake, Minnesota by a canoeist. Some theories regarding Henry's death range from Liberian political assassination to accidental death, suicide, or even his family being involved. Near the end of the voicemail, some claim there was a voice that can be heard saying, "Stop it." Some of these theories certainly have credence, but the recording is very garbled, and what few words are spoken are almost unintelligible. Many people across the Liberian community believe that McCabe was intentionally murdered by someone or even a group of people, and Henry's own brother Timothy believes that he was murdered as well.